Hey guys, welcome back to Jess and Reads Romance. I'm Jessin, and today I'm going to be talking about my most disappointing reads of 2020. Now, not all of these books are books that I rated like the lowest of the year. I had a couple DNFs, had a couple 2 stars, but some 3 stars made it onto this list because I probably was anticipating it. It was anticipation build up, something that I thought that I was gonna love, but just really kind of let me down for one reason or another. And again, there's lots of books that I rated lower that didn't make it onto this list because I just didn't really care about the book and at the end of the day enough to talk about it. It was just kind of like, well, I didn't enjoy that, 2 stars. But these books I had feelings about. I was disappointed, and these are the books that like I feel passionately about. Not in my dislike, but passionately about. I could have liked them, but something was missing. And yeah, again, just like with the video of the popular books that I just don't like, this is not meant to offend if you really like these books. It just didn't really land for me, and I'm really interested in seeing difference of opinion when it comes to like favorites and least favorites. It happens even with like your best reading buddy. Like, you're not gonna like every single thing. And some of these books that like I didn't enjoy, I know a lot of people who really enjoyed them, and vice versa with the books that I really loved, my favorites of the year. Some people were just kind of like, meh, it was fine. For example, Lord of Scoundrels made it onto my favorites list, and I know that a lot of people were less than impressed with Lord of Scoundrels, but it was one of my favorites. Anyway, I'm blabbing a little bit too much, and I want to get into the books. These are in no particular order. I just kind of went through all of my quick reviews and kind of grabbed some, and I deleted a couple off this list because I was just like, I didn't care. I rated it low, but I don't care enough to talk about it, honestly. So the first book that really disappointed me was Credence by Penelope Douglas. I didn't know much about this book. She didn't really advertise too much about what it was about ahead of time, just kind of like popped up on the scene, and all of the teaser graphics with the quotes, they were giving me life. I knew that this was going to be a very kind of taboo romance. I knew that there was going to be 3 guys and 1 girl. And so I was like, oh my God, is this going to be a reverse harem? Like, because it's a dad and his 2 sons. And I was going in ready for the taboo. I'm familiar with Penelope Douglas's work. I know that she likes to push the limits. I haven't loved everything that she's written, but some of my favorite books of all time, she's written them. I love Birthday Girl. So anyway, I was ready for this book. The heroine, Tiernan, has lost both of her parents, and she has really not had a good relationship with them at all. And there's this part of her that yearns to be loved because her parents really didn't show her any love at all. They were all about each other. And I don't want to get into how they died, but that was like quite shocking. So she gets pawned off to her father's stepbrother. Like, they have no other living relatives for her to be with, and so she goes live with him in the mountains, and he has 2 sons. And this book is wild. I was really loving it for the longest time. I really enjoyed it. And there was one point in the romance where you knew that it wasn't going to be reverse harem. She was going to end up with one person. And you can kind of figure out who she's going to end up with by who she starts sleeping with at first, and then who's the next one and the next one. You can kind of figure it out. There's also one line where she talks about her mother, talks about the lovers she'll have in her life, and that was pretty telegraphed as well. It's very hard to talk about why I don't like this book without getting into spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled for this book, don't listen to what I have to say as long as the spoiler sign is on here. I was not on board with who she ended up with in the end. I did not like that Tiernan ended up with Caleb, and it wasn't because this was like a dark romance and I didn't want her to end up with somebody who they kind of had like this abusive relationship. I like dark romance, so that aspect didn't bother me too much. There were a couple scenes where I felt like it was leaning into like degradation, and that's not my favorite type of dark romance to read. I don't like some of the things that Caleb did, like spit on her, right on her forehead with a Sharpie. I'm not into like that degradation type of stuff. But though I sympathize with Caleb's character, we didn't get to know him until way too late in the game. I was not invested with his character. His backstory, while tragic, I didn't understand why he was the way he was because of that. But the way that he acted like he had never been out in society, which is completely untrue. He was around his brother and his father, and they go into town very frequently, but he acts very animalistic. and like he doesn't understand. He throws temper tantrums like a toddler a lot. And so I just didn't feel like his traumatic experience fit with the way that he was. And then all of a sudden at the end, we get to read all the things that he was writing in the margins of his books, and now all of a sudden we understand Caleb, and I was just like, it's too little too late. I don't care. I wish that she ended up with Jake. If she would have ended up with Jake, I would have loved this book so much, really, truly. But I feel like Penelope Douglas was kind of going in for like the shock factor, and it just really let me down. I just didn't enjoy the way that it headed once she wanted to be with Caleb. And I also really didn't like that at the end, randomly, Jake had this romance with, I forgot what her name is, starts with an M, but she was like the assistant to Tiernan's parents because they were like famous or whatever. And it was so random and out of the blue, and I'm like, no, no. Again, I didn't dislike this book because this was a dark romance. Penelope Douglas definitely pushes the limits with what the hero does to the heroine, and that wasn't why I disliked it. The reasons why I didn't like it were spoilers, so sorry I'm being vague. I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't read it and want to read it. Next is Asher by Carrie and Cole. It really pains me to say that I really dislike this book because it was one of my most anticipated reads for this year. I've been looking forward to this couple's story for years. Asher's story has been hinted at for a really long time. We find out a lot more about his background with Ember, his wife, in Torn, which is kind of a spin-off. And after reading Torn, and especially after the epilogue scene in Torn, I was like, oh my God, Asher's going to blow my mind. It's going to blow me out the water. This is going to be the best thing I've ever read. So Asher is a second chance romance between a husband and a wife, and the wife has been in a coma for years. And he has been faithful to his wife this whole time. He's like literally the sweetest man ever, but like a tattooed rock god. And he has been all about his wife. He has never strayed the entire time that she's been in a coma. Ah, my battery's gonna die. 1 second. All right, I'm back. So I was so on board for them falling in love with each other again. This is a slight spoiler, but Ember wakes up and she has amnesia. She doesn't even remember who she is at all. So she definitely does not remember that she has a husband and she has a daughter who she has completely forgotten about. And this is so heartbreaking for Asher, who has been so constant, so sure that Ember would wake up again one day, when other people were like, I don't know, I think you should move on. I think you should let her go. He was like, no, like she's gonna come back to me. And it's very devastating for him to realize that he has regained his wife, but she's not there. Physically she's there, but mentally nothing about the person that he fell in love with is present anymore. I knew that this was going to be like a hard fought battle between falling in love again, and what really did not work with me was the amount of time spent on focusing on how they originally fell in love. We get a lot of those scenes in Torn from Kenzie, who is Ember and Asher's daughter. So I already knew a ton about their history, and it felt a little repetitive to repeat it again for Asher. And while I totally understand why Asher is kind of stuck in the past, wants to remind Ember of who they once were, I wish that there was more time spent on them getting to know each other now, on getting to know this version of Ember, the person who did not remember anything. I wanted to see Asher like court her, like date her like he's never dated her before. I wanted the romance, but every single thing he did was like in an effort to like jog her memory, and you could feel his disappointment when her memory wasn't jogged when he was doing that. So it was just like, and then there was a scene at the end, she makes this decision where she's doing it for herself, and I completely get it, but she doesn't get the reaction that she thinks she's going to get. And I agree that Asher was just like, what the fuck is going on? And I was like that too. I was like, you can't do that. What? That is an elaborate thing to do. And wow, I wasn't on board with it. It was so angsty, so heartbreaking. I felt for both of these characters. She was devastated because she has this guy who has been faithful to her this whole time, been so constant, been at her side. He's showing how much he cares, but she's also like, well, he doesn't want me. He wants Ember. He wants who I used to be. I want him to want me, and I got that. And then I also got Asher being like, well, I want my wife back. But also there's these little things that feel very similar to who she used to be that I love and enjoy. And I also enjoy these new aspects of her. I get all of that, but I just didn't feel like it came together, and I was just really hoping for more. Next is My Favorite Souvenir by Vi Keelan and Penelope Ward. Now, I wasn't like anticipating this book at all, but the reason why it's on this list is because the first half of the book, I loved it. I was like, oh my God, this is so good. This is so interesting, so fun. And then the second half of the book was just such a letdown, and I get so disappointed when I think that a book's going to be a 5-star read and then all of a sudden something happens to completely change my opinion, like in the middle of the book. And that's what happened in this book. The heroine, Hazel, has just broken it off with her fiance, and she takes this trip because they were going to do this like destination wedding together. That gets called off. So she's kind of stuck at this resort in a snowstorm, but she's already checked out. And so she's to return back to the resort. There's no rooms because everybody's trying to find a room. She sees this guy who kind of cons his way into a room saying like, oh yeah, that's my reservation, because they were calling people to confirm like, hey, we just want to make sure that you're coming tonight, because if not, we're going to give away your room. And he's listening to the receptionist say this name, so he pops up and he's like, yes, I am this person that you just called, and I just made it here. Hazel jumps in on the party and she's like, yes, I am his sister. And it's just such like a random meeting, random occurrence. They just need a place to stay for the night. And since they're both there alone, they kind of end up by hanging out together by default. They have such a good time while they spend the couple days stranded in the snowstorm at this resort that they decide, we don't want to go home. Let's go like on a road trip together. Crazy. Like, you don't know this person, but let's go on a road trip. They hit all kinds of hot spots, hot tourist attractions, and they end up in New Orleans. They're kind of falling for each other, and they decide that there's real connection between us. And if we still feel the same way in this many months, I don't know if it was months or years. This was one of the books that I read earlier in the year, but it still made an impression on me. Anyway, if we still feel the same way, we're gonna meet back at this hotel again. And I was just like, this is such a fun romance. I love this. And then it just kerplopped. I don't like when a lot of situations feel too coincidental. Like it's like, how can that happen? What are the odds that this would happen? This is also a spoiler for the book. Most of the reasons why I dislike the books are going to be spoilers. So again, spoiler. We find out that he, the hero, is actually good friends with her fiance, but she has never, her ex-fiance, but she has never met this guy before. She's only heard about him. He lives like in California and they live in like New York. As soon as they separate, she goes back home and her fiance wants her back. And he's like campaigning hard to have her back. And I don't even know why she entertains him, because the reason why they broke up, it's like, okay, well then that's done. Like, you're done with him. Why would you take this asshole back? And she actually entertains him. And I'm just like, what? It became a completely different book. And then the hero shows up to stay with the ex-fiance, and then they have to pretend like they don't know each other. And it is just such a clusterfuck that I was just like, so disappointed. I was so disappointed with where it went. Lots of angst because the heroine couldn't make up her mind whether or not she wanted to take back the fiance or not. And the hero was very hurt by this scenario. So, and I totally got it. Totally got why he was mad about it. Next was The Third Best Thing by Maya Hughes. This is a new adult romance in college. I really loved the second book in the series. I think it's The Second We Met. It was such a great enemies to lovers. And the couple for The Third Best Thing was very much teased in The Second We Met, and I was so excited about it. So the heroine from The Second We Met has a roommate. She's a little plus size and she loves to secretly pole dance, okay? Like, she loves it. And one of the neighbors is receiving like these anonymous letters from this secret admirer. And in The Second We Met, we get a huge hint that it's actually the roommate, the one who likes to pole dance. And she's been sending these secret admirer letters to Burke, who is the hero. So I'm just like, ooh, this is going to be so much fun. Burke enlists Jules to help him discover who the secret admirer is, because they're kind of friends. Jules is always bringing over baked goods to the like frat house next door, and they love her and she's like such a good friend. And so Burke's like, Jules, why don't you help me with this? And of course, She thinks that she cannot live up to like his expectations for the girl that he's expecting. She has a lot of body image issues. Burke ends up by being her like fake date for her sister's wedding. Her mother's horrendous, horrible towards her, always telling her to lose weight, always just like not thinking about her feelings. And the reason why I dislike this book so much is because Burke is so oblivious to the turmoil that Jules is in because of her mother's attitude towards her, and Burke just doesn't see it. But he's like literally standing right next to her as her mother is like insulting her, and he's just like, what's wrong? Like, you seem upset. And he's just so clueless, and I'm just like, what is this? I just didn't like it. It felt so flat for me. I was really expecting her to be such a body positive plus size heroine because she was just like, yes, I like my body. I love to pole dance. Just like watch me work. But then she was so self-conscious about her body. Didn't want anybody to know that she did this, and she was wearing extremely baggy clothes out in public, and it was just like, oh, it was so sad. It was just so sad. I just felt too bad for the heroine. I couldn't even enjoy the romance. Coincidentally, next on this list is The Dare, and I had a lot of issues with the representation for a plus size heroine again in this romance, but that just one of the things that I disliked about The Dare. And I really love the Briar U and the Off-Campus series. I like these college romances, and this is the first one that I really disliked. The reason why I disliked it was the whole premise of The Dare. There is this stupid game of Dare or Dare, and this mean girl is like terrorizing people, daring them to do things that they are completely uncomfortable with. The heroine Taylor has already been dared once to like make out with a girl, and the girl that she made out with is like struggling so bad with this. Like, she's traumatized by this experience, and the hazing that this mean girl is doing is getting away with. The mean girl has it out for our heroine so bad. She hates Taylor. Taylor's this curvaceous plus size girl. And so she dares Taylor to have sex with like one of the really hot guys or else. And I'm just like, what is this? Like, why would you go along with this? It's like sexual exploitation in the form of a dare. Like, you're forcing somebody to have sex with somebody else because of a dare. It was so bad. If this dare was like all fun and games, a joke between friends, and it just so happened to turn into romance, I could see that, but it felt so malicious from the very first, and I hated it. So because Taylor is constantly being like attacked by this mean girl, both verbally and just like with rumors spread about her, she really has difficulty accepting that the hero likes her for who she is. And every single time somebody else has something to say about her body, it affects her relationship with the hero. It's nothing that the hero's doing. It's not a conflict between them. It's a conflict that it's her mentally. She cannot believe that someone as hot as him would want a girl like her. And it was just such a disappointing read. So disappointing. I was just like, it felt so strange after reading the previous books in the series that I really enjoyed, and I was just like, this doesn't even feel like the books that I love in this series. Next I have From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I was not part of the YA scene when Sarah J. Maas and Jennifer Armentrout were like really big. So this was the first Jennifer Armentrout that I've ever read before. I know a lot of like hardcore fans of JLM felt like this book was a miss, but still, disliking this book is still a minority opinion, and I just did not enjoy the world building in this book. It was very confusing, and I felt like the secretness of the world building was drawn out for so long just to have like this big reveal at the end, and I didn't feel like it justified that. I feel like that there was something else that could have happened that would have given us really good world building in the beginning, not dragged it off while still keeping the element of surprise. I just feel like it could have been done a different way. It didn't really feel like a fantasy world either. It felt kind of modern. The dialogue felt kind of modern sometimes, and then it felt very old school, an old world, and it was a very strange combination. I didn't really get on board with the heroine being like a badass, strong heroine. She felt very naive and very kind of led by others, and she had a couple moments where she was just like, I am so skilled with the sword, and I was just like, I don't believe it. I don't know. It wasn't enough for me to be like, this heroine is like so badass. But again, I'm in the minority. I'm not gonna harp on this because I did a whole vlog on this, so I feel like I've talked it to death. It still was one of the ones that I was just like, I was expecting a lot because of the name. Because JLM's name carries a lot of weight because a lot of people really like her, and so my expectations were completely high because she's a lot of people's favorite author. And unfortunately, I think I tried the book that is not her best work. Next is the Happy Ever After playlist. This is another case of I loved half the book and I was so in love with it, so convinced that it was gonna be a 5-star. And then the second half of the book, I was like, what happened? So it was so funny. The way that this romance started off, it was so hilarious, such a great comedy situation where the heroine discovers this dog. Well, it kind of like jumps into her car in like moving traffic, and she's been grieving her fiance who passed away, and this all happened in the first book of this series. She finds this dog. She's been trying to contact this owner for a long time, and she eventually bonds with the dog and just like, well, I'm gonna keep him. Like, I love him. We have such fun together, and screw whoever neglectful owner just let this dog out of their sights and just never checked up on him. Come to find out, the owner is actually a rock star and he's been on tour. He thought that he left the dog with somebody who would take care of it, and they did not. Finally gets messages and tries to contact her, and she's just like, I'm keeping this dog. They start this texting, messaging relationship and kind of fall for each other that way. And when he finally comes back into town, they meet for the first time and the sparks are just like flying. It's just so good. But then about halfway through, there's this conflict because he needs to go on tour. They don't want to have a long distance relationship, and everything that can go wrong does go wrong on this tour. And it was just so, it took a turn for like angsty. Like the entire tone of the book just switched. It was just like so fun, light, fluffy, while still being very emotional because the heroine's coming to terms with falling in love with somebody else and moving on from her fiance who she planned this whole life with. And she feels a little bit guilty about moving on. I really like that. But then we tack on the angst from the tour. Stupid drama with like a jealous rock star / stalker after the hero, and of course there's misunderstandings, and I was just like, what happened to this book? I really like them as a couple. I could have done without the entire on tour scene, and I feel like the way that it was resolved, I was just like, y'all could have done this the whole time. It just felt very weird. I didn't like it. Next is Faked by Carla Sorensen. I discovered Carla Sorensen through Smarty Pants Romance. She wrote Baking Me Crazy and Batter of Wits in the Donner Baker series, and I discovered her Washington Wool series, which is a sports romance. She did a spin-off from them, Focused, I really loved, and Faked was the second one. The couple in this book was kind of teased, but in an author's note at the beginning, she mentions that she originally planned for the heroine to fall in love with her twin sister's best friend, who was a guy. Ollie, I mean, what you doing? He's being extremely needy right now, so he's gonna stay like this for the rest of the video. So she had last minute plans to change it because she tried to write the story where the heroine was falling in love with her twin sister's best friend. And she was like, it just wasn't working out. And I totally understand it. I think the problem lies in that Carla Sorensen didn't give herself enough time to rework the story with this new angle, this new hero, because the hero completely changed. The hero is actually the half brother of the guy that the heroine has a crush on. This sounds so complicated without like using names, but I can't remember the names for this book. So the hero is kind of like the black sheep of the family. His father remarried and his stepmother doesn't really like him, and he felt like he couldn't really be close with his brother because of like the stepmother just like had it out for him. None of the hero's issues with his family were ever resolved. I didn't feel satisfied in his personal conflict because that was a lot of his like identity issues. He was this snowboarder with a chip on his shoulder, and I didn't feel like any of that was resolved. He meets the heroine. There was a strange, she has to pretend to be her twin sister scenario, which I didn't understand. It didn't work. It would have worked if the hero was the original hero, the switching places thing, but I felt like it was weird in this book, in this iteration with this hero, the hero who is the brother now. So they get snowed in together, and I felt like this book was very rushed very short, and yeah, just didn't do it for me. But I was looking forward to this romance like for a long time, ever since it was telegraphed in the first book. So very much disappointed with how it turned out. Okay, the next one is Ties at Tether. I was really looking forward to this story. The reason why I didn't like it was kind of a spoiler, so I'll put up a spoiler warning right here. The plot revolves around this accidental pregnancy, and I did not like the way that this accidental pregnancy played into their relationship. And also the hero has a secret that he kept from the heroine. And I didn't understand the reason why he just did not want to talk about this. And I don't even believe that he would have ever brought it up unless these random events occurred to basically force his hand and make him open up to the heroine about his past with his wife. Then on top of that, the heroine's mother was so incredibly awful to her. And it was because there was like this culture clash. She had promised her father, who died, that she would marry a Nigerian man, and she ends up by falling in love with somebody who's Spanish, and her mother is so disappointed in her. But the way that she treated her, like she even tells the heroine, the mom tells the heroine, she's dead to her. Like, you're no child of mine. I was just like, wow, this is taking things too far. Like, oh my God, it was awful. It was so awful. And then there was an ex-boyfriend kind of thing, but the mom like preferred him, but he was like the asshole in the scenario. It was just a lot, and none of it really worked for me. So the next one that I have is The One That Got Away by Karina Halley. I really loved The Forbidden Man. I keep getting confused because I think it was originally called The Younger Man, but now it's The Forbidden Man, or vice versa. I can't remember, but I really liked that one. I really liked Real Madrid, like the whole soccer scenario. I love being in Spain. It was so awesome. So I was like, ooh, this is the second one where we go back to the players in Real Madrid. How exciting. But The One That Got Away, I could have been on board with it if it was just a second chance romance. But this was we meet multiple times throughout a decade, and it never works. The heroine had so many issues that I feel like she never worked through, and she annoyed me to no end. She self-sabotaged so much, and I just did not want this couple to be together by the end of the book. By the middle of the book, I was over it, but I still was like, okay, so what is going to be like the final straw that pushes them together? And it's like, now this is for real. Now we're going to be together. So I was always like interested in being like, well, how are they going to work it out? But it definitely took way too long. I did not like them together as a couple. I thought that they were kind of toxic together. The next one that I have is Simmer Down by Sarah Smith. I didn't enjoy Faker, but I wanted to give her another shot. So I got an arc of Simmer Down, and I was like, this is going to be it. It's a foodie romance. I love food truck romances, but the enemies aspect was very contrived. It didn't start off on the right foot for me. I didn't like how their enemies relationship began. It felt very over the top. And then there was barely any food truck things happening. I DNF'd this book at the point where both the hero and the heroine just so happened to end up on the same plane from Hawaii to London. And I was like, oh, so we're not even gonna be in Hawaii for this food truck competition? Like, the whole reason why I wanted this book, like, we're not even gonna be there. We're going to London now. And so I was just like, nothing about this book was working for me. The humor didn't land. Nothing landed for me. It was just very disappointing read. I really needed more chemistry between the leads. And lastly, I did not enjoy The Raycast. The Raycast was a book that had been on my radar, and I was iffy about whether or not I was going to read it. I heard very mixed reactions from it, but of course I like to form my own opinion. My expectations going in definitely colored my reaction to the book. I was expecting a very sex positive heroine who really enjoyed sex, but she used it as a means for self-sabotage, and it just didn't really work for me with my expectations going in. It wasn't the kind of book that I thought it was going to be, and that's why it didn't work for me. But I know that this is one of Crystal's favorite books of the year, and I get why. Like, I totally get it. But the pain and the suffering that the heroine went through, not just the heroine, the hero as well, which I love them and I wanted them to be okay, but I just felt like their individual conflicts were just too much and overshadowed their romance, if that makes sense. Like, if there wasn't so much baggage between the two of them, I might have liked it more, and I might have been able to enjoy the times where they had like some good happy times, but they were kind of few and far between. Lots of self-sabotaging, lots of almost but not quite scenarios where it's like you think that they're gonna get on the same page, but then something ruins it. And so it was just kind of like sad and a little bit frustrating. Were you sad and frustrated? You sad because you didn't get a nap today? Oh, he's so cute and so cuddly. He's very needy, very needy. That's why he always has to be in the room whenever I'm filming, because he just needs to be near me. And then he's like, all right, nap time now. But I've been filming for a while now, so he's like over it. Anyway, those were the most disappointing books that I read this year. And it's because I had expectations, or I liked a lot of it, but then something just kind of ruined it for me. That's it. Well, I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure that you subscribe to get notified about any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, life's better with a little HEA. Bye, guys. Bye. Bye.